watching HCAM's public channel, where you can keep up with the latest events happening in Hingham and our surrounding communities. For more community-related programming, tune in to HCAM's educational channel on Comcast 22, Verizon Fios 29, and Government channel on Comcast 9 and Verizon Fios 30.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. Just wanted to give it a few extra minutes just because of the weather, see if people are making their way in. So tonight we're going to talk about the Hingham Naval Ammo Depot and an environmental remediation effort being performed by the Army Corps of Engineers and their consultants here in Bear Cove Park in Hingham. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Lane Young, who's a member of Arcadis, who is the consultant hired by the Army Corps to perform this work. And he'll be doing the presentation tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Like Tom said, my name is Lane Young, and I work for a firm called Arcadis, and we are working with the Army Corps of Engineers to do some investigations at the former Hingham Naval Ammo Depot, which is sort of why we're all here today. So before I get started, a couple sort of logistical things. We have some fact sheets up here. So if you don't have a fact sheet, you can either grab one of those now or grab one at the end. We also have a questionnaire. We have like 6 questions. We're interested to find out, what you guys may know about the former depot, about any environmental concerns that may be there, and we're also interested to find out, the best way to keep in touch with you guys, to inform you about what we're doing, about the project, and about how the project may affect the community in any way. So we also have a sign-in sheet, so if you wouldn't mind, we'd like to keep track of folks who attended the meeting so we can, again, reach out as necessary if people have questions and concerns. So if you have a minute now or after the meeting, if you could just take a second, fill out the survey, and sign the sign-in sheet, we'd appreciate it. Thanks. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we are, like I said, we are here in Hingham tonight to talk about the remedial investigation that we will be doing at the former Hingham Naval Ammo Depot. So I think it's stuck. Oh, there we go. So along with myself, here's the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little about who's here from our team. We're going to introduce the project. We're going to talk a little bit about the site history. So we're going to talk about what the Navy did at the depot, a little bit about the previous studies that the Army Corps of Engineers have conducted at the former depot already. We're going to talk about what our plan is for the remedial investigation and what that means for the community of Hingham and Weymouth. And then we have some time at the end if anybody has any questions or concerns or any sort of additional information that they'd like to share or talk with us about, we'll all be available. So, like I said, in addition to myself, we have members from the Army Corps of Engineers that are here as well, and Massachusetts DEP is here as well. So if you have any questions that I can't answer, I may defer to them for their expertise as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So real quick, a little bit about why we're here today, sort of the drivers behind this investigation that we're doing. So the former Hingham Naval Ammo Depot is a formerly used defense site. That's the term that the Department of Defense uses for properties that were previously used by the military and have since been transferred out of the government's control. So the Army Corps of Engineers is the lead agency for addressing environmental issues at these FUDS sites. Specifically at Hingham, we're here to look for munitions-related items. So our investigation falls under what's called the Military Munitions Response Program. The acronym for that is MMRP. So I'm going to try to stay away from acronyms, but if you hear me say MMRP, that's just sort of the program that this investigation falls under. And the MMRP follows the CERCLA or Superfund process. That's the sort of investigation and cleanup process that the MMRP follows, and the process that we're going to follow for our work at the former depot. So the Corps of Engineers has surveyed and assessed and prioritized all of the FUD sites across the United States. So Hingham was not identified as presenting an imminent threat when they did that prioritization. But there is a concern that there are some munitions-related items that may still be present at the site from the past military use, so that's why we're here today. And like I said before, we have been coordinating with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection throughout this whole process, and we will continue to do that. So DEP and the town, they're aware of what we're doing. They're engaged in this. They have the ability, and we've asked them to comment on our work plans and all our reports. So all of that will be available to them as well. So real quick, I mentioned the CERCLA or the Superfund process. So I just want to talk real briefly about what that process is and kind of point out where we are in that process. So I have a pointer here. So there have been, like I said, some investigations that have been done at the former depot. So the process starts out with a preliminary assessment and a site inspection. The site inspection for the depot was conducted in 2008, and the primary purpose of the site inspection was to determine whether there is the potential for the presence or absence of munitions or munitions-related debris or munitions-related chemical constituents or chemicals that may still be present at the depot as a result of the military's past use of the property. So the site inspection was completed in 2008. Currently, right now, we are in the planning phase for the remedial investigation, which is this phase, the third step in the process. So the purpose of the remedial investigation, which I'll talk a little bit more in a second, is to sort of determine the nature and extent of any munitions-related contamination at the former depot, to see sort of what might be there and where it may be, and how much of it may be there. And then following the remedial investigation, there are several other steps where, depending on what we find, then we'll do an evaluation of what might be the next best thing to do, how we may, if we do find something that's there that poses a threat, how we might want to clean that up. And there's a feasibility study which sort of goes through all the options, and we evaluate all those options. And then once all those options are evaluated, those options are presented to the community in what's called the proposed plan, where the community is going to have a ability to comment on those options. And then out of that, if necessary, the cleanup alternative will be selected. So that's, probably more than we can all digest, but it's sort of the process that we're going through. So a little bit about the site history at Hingham. I don't know how much everybody here knows about it, but so the former Naval Ammo Depot is located in what is now Plymouth County and Norfolk County on the northern edge of the Weymouth Back River in Hingham and Weymouth, Massachusetts. So the property was acquired by the military in 1909. It was first, they started construction in 1911, and it was used all the way to the early 1960s when the property was considered excess and they stopped using it. And then the property was transferred to the town of Hingham and the town of Weymouth in the 1970s. So the former depot is 991 acres of land and water in and surrounding the Weymouth Back River. You'll see in a second some maps. Our investigation doesn't include all 991 of those acres. They've done some previous investigations and have pinpointed and narrowed down the areas that we're going to be investigating as part of our effort this year and in the near future. So, and then currently, the property is owned. The majority of the property of the former depot is owned by the town of Hingham and the town of Weymouth, and it's either utilized as Bear Cove Park or Great Esker Park. And these photos right here, these are just, you probably might not be able to see them from the back real well, but there's an aerial photo of the depot from the 1940s, and we have some photos of just some ongoing activities, and then some stuff from the museum at the park right now. So if you guys haven't been to the museum, there's lots of historical artifacts there related to the depot. A little bit more about the depot and what it was used for. So the purpose of the depot was primarily for the transportation of munitions from the depot to ships out in the Boston Harbor. So what they would do, they would take packaged munitions, they would load them onto barges from piers that are in the river. So if you're familiar with the Bear Cove Park, you'll see some remnants of some piers out there. They would load these barges with this ammunition and then float those barges out to the battleships and other ships used in World War I and World War II primarily. And we will be investigating 6 what we call munitions response sites. That's the acronym for that is MRS. We will be investigating 6 MRSs as part of this effort. And it's our understanding, based on the historical information we have, that we're assuming that all 6 of those MRSs were used from 1911 to 1962, or basically the entire active life of the depot. So these 3 bullets here talk about the previous investigations, previous studies that have been done at the park. So in 1996, the Army Corps of Engineers did an archive search report where they went back and they looked at historical information, they conducted interviews, they did a site walk to try to figure out and identify specific areas of concern based on how the property was used by the Navy to determine where there might be potential munitions-related issues remaining at the site, based on kind of what they did there and where they may have left some stuff behind. In 2008, the Corps of Engineers conducted a site inspection where it was again focused on military munitions and then any pieces of munitions or any chemicals related to those munitions. And then that site inspection confirmed that there is a potential for some munitions or munitions-related items to be present at the former depot, and it also narrowed down and focused the areas where further investigations will take place. And then in 2014, there was a report that the Army Corps of Engineers did, which made recommendations for further actions at the site, which is kind of where brings us to where we are today with our remedial investigation, which is the next step in the process. So here's a map of the former depot. You can see this green border here. That's the border of the entire FUDS site. So that's the full 991 acres that made up the depot. And then these colored polygons, there are 6 of them, and here are the names of them over here. These 6 colored polygons are the specific areas within the depot that we're going to be investigating as part of the remedial investigation. So I'll go through these in detail in a second, sort of talk about how they were used and why we're looking there. But I'll start in the north. There's this red polygon right here. That's the North Pier. That's where they would load ammunition onto barges before they floated it out to put it on some battleships. We have this green polygon right here. That is a what we're calling a furnace area, which is something similar to an incinerator, where again we'll talk about it again later, but it's where they would dispose of unserviceable or unused munitions. No problem. We have this purple rectangular polygon. Thank you. Polygon right here. That's the South Pier. Again, that's where they would load ammunition on the barges at the South Pier. And if you're familiar with the park, like I said, there are still remnants of that pier today at the park. This yellow polygon right here is what we're calling a debris burial area. So the debris burial area is a place where they disposed of waste from the depot, so solid waste, which may consist of munitions or munitions-related items there at the debris burial area. Over here, we have our fifth site, which is a dump area. Again, it is what we believe to be a just solid waste dump. It may contain some munitions-related items there. And then lastly, we have the Weymouth Back River site, and that's this whole blue, sort of covers the entire Weymouth Back River south of this Route 3A bridge, and land over here to the east. So it includes both land and water in the Weymouth Back River site. And again, we'll talk about these in a little more detail as we move along. So the first site that we talked about is this North Pier, and here are some pictures of the North Pier today. You can see in these pictures some remnants of the pier, and in the background you can see the Route 3A bridge, just for reference. The North Pier is 1.8 acres in size, and it is 100% in the water. So we're going to be investigating the sediment in the water. So we'll be out in the water doing investigation in the subsurface sediment. And like I said before, the historical use of the North Pier was used for the transportation. It was the transfer point from the land onto the barges, so they could get that ammunition out to the battleships in Boston Harbor. This is a zoomed in map of the North Pier boundaries. So as you can see right here, this is actually where the pier is on the east side, but our site actually extends out into the river a little bit. One of the reports from the, I think the archive search report suggested that there may be debris, munitions-related debris, up to 20 to 30 yards into the river. So as you see, our site extends out beyond where the pier used to be. The second area that we're going to look at is the dump area. It's 1 acre in size, and historically, it was used for the disposal of solid waste from the depot. And that solid waste, we believe, could have included munitions items or things related to munitions that were used at the depot. Things such as, empty ammunition cans, shipping pallets, pieces of munitions, fuses and boosters, and that type of thing. Could potentially be out here. It is on a steep slope and does go out a little bit into the sediment in the wetland area. Here's a zoomed in aerial photo. It shows the boundaries of the dump area site. There's a road, if you're familiar with the park, there's a road sort of runs right here. We believe they would, historically, they would pull up their trucks and dump it over the steep hill, dump the waste over the hill. Some of that waste is still visible today, so we're going to go through that during our investigation and determine exactly what's there. This is a picture of the South Pier right here. It's very similar to the North Pier. It's a little larger. It's 3.5 acres. Again, our entire site is in the water, so we'll be investigating the sediment there at the South Pier. Again, same use. It was used, we believe, from 1911 to 1961, and it was the transfer point from getting the packaged munitions from the depot onto the barges. So potentially things may have, fallen off during that process that may still be in the river today. Here's a picture, an aerial photograph with the boundaries of the South Pier. Familiar with the park, the museum is right there. Is that correct? I believe.
That wasn't built until 1942, so it wouldn't be from 1911.
Oh, all right. Well, that's good to know. So the South Pier was built in 1942? All right. So during World War II then. So activities during World War II and afterwards. Next one is the furnace area. If you remember where this was north. It's right north of the South Pier on the edge of the river. It's 3 acres in size. 1.6 acres of that 3 acres is water. From what we know, we believe it was used, without any other information available to us, the entire life span of the depot, which is from about 50 years. And like I said, the furnace area is something similar to an incinerator, where if they had unused or unserviceable munitions, small munitions, things like small arms, medium caliber munitions, and pieces of larger munitions, they would put them in the furnace area to get rid of them. Today, the furnace area doesn't exist. The foundation of the furnace area is still there. And here are some pictures just of the furnace area, of the foundation of the furnace area that you can still see. And on the right, it's hard to see, but right there, there's a piece of just an old casing that we found when we were on a site walk out there. So just one example of one item that we knew was out there. I'm sorry about my cough. Get some water. This is, again, an aerial photograph showing the boundaries of the furnace area site. The furnace area itself is over here on the southeastern edge, but as you can see, our area of investigation extends to a larger area. And there, as you can see, it covers land and water. We'll be investigating both the land and the water, the soil, and the sediment. Next up is the Weymouth Back River site. It's the largest of the 6 sites. It's 227 acres. 203 of those acres are in the water, and 24 acres are on the land. And same historic use as the North Pier and South Pier, basically the transportation of the munitions from the depot on barges out to the harbor. These are just some pictures of the Weymouth Back River from various spots within Bear Cove Park. This picture right here is looking south. You can see this is near the furnace area looking south. You can see the South Pier right there. The remains of the South Pier right there. This map, we don't have an aerial photograph in this presentation of the Weymouth Back River, but you can see, like we talked about before, this whole big blue polygon is the Weymouth Back River site that we'll be investigating on both the Hingham and the Weymouth side. And the last of the 6 sites is our debris burial area, or basically a dump. It's 8.2 acres of land. Go back one, we'll see where it is. It's this yellow polygon right here. And historically, you know, it was used as a dump area for the disposal of solid waste, which would potentially include munitions or pieces of munitions or other items that the depot had that they wanted to get rid of. You'll see some acronyms here, MEC and MD. I meant to remove those, I apologize. MEC is basically munitions and explosives of concern. That's our acronym for actual munitions items. And then MD is our acronym for munitions debris, and that's pieces of the items that don't have an explosive hazard. They're just, you know, pieces of a larger item that have been broken apart. So here, this is a picture in the debris burial area on the shore. And then here, this is sort of in the grassy areas looking towards the river on the other side of those trees in the debris burial area. And if you've been out to Bear Cove Park and walked around, I mean, you may have seen some small arms casings or some other sort of items that look like they might be historically from the depot. So we would expect to find some stuff out there. Here's an aerial photograph that shows the boundaries of the burial area. I will say that, you know, in addition to being a dump, the burial area, I think in the 1940s, when they did some dredging in the river, the burial area was built, it was expanded. This land was expanded with some of the spoils from the dredging. So that's part of our investigation is, you know, wondering whether or not some of the spoils from the dredging that got then put into the barrel area, debris barrel area, might have had munitions in them from the river. So those are our 6 sites that we're investigating as part of the remedial investigation, which is what this effort is called. Like I mentioned before, the purpose of the remedial investigation, after the site inspection, the Army did confirm that there is the potential for munitions or munitions-related items or munitions-related chemical contamination to be at these sites. So our goal now is to characterize, like I said, the nature and extent of that contamination or the presence of those munitions, to see how many might be there and what are the boundaries where those items may be in. We will also, in addition to determining nature and extent, we will assess the potential explosive hazards and the risks to human health and ecological receptors. And also we're going to look into, we're going to take some soil samples and sediment samples out there. We're going to look and determine whether there is a potential, if we find any contamination, for that contamination to leach, from the soil into the groundwater. We're going to look into that as part of our investigation as well. Then lastly, at the very end, once we've done all our investigation and we've sort of have our results, we're going to make some determinations as what should happen next. Is there a threat? Is there a hazard? If not, then we may determine that there's no further action that's needed out there. But we may determine, based on what we find, that there is some level of cleanup that needs to be done in some or all of these MRSs. But we won't know that till after we get our data back from our investigation. These are some pictures from some similar projects that we are doing. Projects very similar to this project that we're doing at other FUD sites in the United States. This is a picture of a scuba diver investigating an underwater anomaly. So like I said, we're at the North Pier, the South Pier, and the Weymouth Back River. We're going to investigate items in the subsurface. So that's a picture of somebody doing that. I'll talk a little bit in a second about how we do our investigation, but this is a picture of a site worker collecting data on a beach somewhere. This is similar to the instrument that we're going to use during our investigations at the depot to look for metallic items underneath the ground surface. And then this is just a picture of somebody taking some soil samples. And like I mentioned, we will be taking soil and sediment samples during our investigation to determine whether there are any chemical constituent contamination remaining from munitions that might be present at the depot. So a little bit about what our work during this investigation, what our field work is going to be and what it's going to look like. So like I briefly mentioned a second ago on the last slide, we, in our efforts to find munitions items in the subsurface, in the soil, and in the sediment at those 6 sites, we have metal detectors that we use on the land and in the water, where we run them over the sites. They tell us, whether there is any metallic item in the subsurface, and then we will investigate those items, either in the sediment or in the soil, to try to figure out what those are. Is it a horseshoe? Is it a alternator from an engine? Is it a munitions item? Is it just a hunk of metal? Just to determine what it might be. And then we, again, like I said, we will be collecting environmental samples, so some soil and sediment. And I don't think I mentioned, we will be taking some groundwater samples as well from one of the sites. These are some pictures of just some guys, collecting data. Here's this this is one of our metal detectors that he's pushing along the ground. So as that detector gets pushed across the ground, it sends a signal to the ground. And then as things bounce back up, it records the signal, and it has some GPS stuff attached to it, so we know where we are when it receives that signal, so we can go back and investigate those items that we may come across. This is a picture of one of the boats. Like I said, we will be working on the water, so we will have boats out there with this instrumentation on them. We'll be going up and down the Weymouth Back River in these boats, collecting data about the bottom of the river, so we know where we can go look to see if there are any items remaining in the river. So the process, like I said, we'll use these instruments to collect subsurface data along transects on the land and in the water. Transects are just some predefined paths that we're going to walk across to collect the data. And that effort is currently scheduled for, I think we're scheduled to start our data collection in the very end of September. So very end of September, October through December of this year, December of 17. And then once we have that data back, then we will analyze that data and then determine where we have to go back and look for items. We'll go back out in the field and we'll actually go investigate, dig, and see what those metallic anomalies, what those metallic items are. And here are just some pictures of some guys, again, at similar projects, collecting data. And then here are some guys digging, trying to figure out what one of those metallic items in the subsurface might be. So you'll see guys out here looking like this, doing some work out at Bear Cove Park this fall. So what's next? Like I said, it's our plan to start collecting our data and doing our field work in the fall of this year. Once we have that data back, then we're gonna evaluate that data. We will be writing reports that we will be providing to the town. The town will have a chance to comment on those, as will Massachusetts DEP will be provided the opportunity to comment on those reports about our findings. The complete report is expected in the spring, summer of 2018. And like I mentioned before, once we have our data back and we write our report and we kind of know what is out there at these sites, then we will do what's called a feasibility study, where we're going to evaluate, if necessary, the potential ways that we might need to address any concerns that we found based on our investigation. And then out of that feasibility study comes this proposed plan that I talked about before, where we outline the alternatives and we sort of tell the community this, based on what we found, based on all the alternatives for cleaning up, this is what we feel is the best alternative for the site. And like I mentioned before, the public will have an opportunity to comment on that plan, and there'll be another public meeting specifically focused on that plan. And that'll be in the schedule now for the fall of next year. So about a year from when we start our field work to collect our data. Last bullet there, that just talks about there is a 30-day public comment period on that proposed plan for everybody to take a look at. A couple other things about some specific things about the safety, some safety considerations for our project. We are dealing with potential explosive hazards during this investigation, so there are some very serious safety concerns that we do take into account. So Army regulations require that when we are out there digging in the subsurface, either in the sediment in the water or on the soil on the land, that we establish a safety zone around where that digging occurs. That safety zone is established in the event that, we are digging on a potential explosive item. If something were to happen, nobody would be inside of that safety zone. So that is for the safety of the public and our workers as well. So while we are digging in the park on these items, the public must stay out of these safety zones. If anybody comes inside of these safety zones, we have to stop work, and we can't continue until that zone is cleared of everybody. We will have, a team out there with safety guys whose job it is to make sure that that safety zone around where we're digging is free of unauthorized personnel, that nobody's in there. So we will make sure that that's clear while we're doing our operations. These safety zones will primarily impact Bear Cove Park, Great Esker Park, and the Weymouth Back River. So at any given time during our field work, there will be portions of the Bear Cove Park, potentially Great Esker Park, and the Weymouth Back River where people are not going to be allowed to go while we're doing our work. As we get more information, as we get our schedule established, we will be sharing that information with the community. You guys are going to have a heads up about when we're going to start doing our work. We're going to put signs and stuff up at the parks. We'll have more public meetings. This is sort of the first one of several. So I want to introduce everybody to the project. But that's kind of one of the main community involvement issues that we're going to have to make sure that we stay on top of for this project. Again, we will have another community public meeting to provide more information about our field work when it's closer to that field work. So like I said, we're supposed to start our field work in late September, October. So before that, we will be back up here and we're going to talk in greater detail about what that means for everybody. We have been in communication with the Selectman's office, with Tom, with the public safety departments. We had a meeting this afternoon with the fire, police, and harbor masters. So we are in communication with them, and as the project progresses, we will increase that communication and coordination with the town. So what to expect for the community? You can expect to see folks out in Bear Cove Park starting in late September, going through December. We'll be collecting our data and then going back and investigating specific items that we think might potentially be related to munitions. And you can expect, continuing communication and awareness throughout the life of this project. So throughout the field effort, you'll hear from us. I think we're going to put some stuff on the Hingham website. I think we'll have some stuff. We have some fact sheets here. We're going to put up flyers at the park. We'll talk about it in a second. We have a phone number that you guys can call. We have an email if you have any questions. And then lastly, once we are going to again have public meetings, once we have our data back and we have our reports, we'll have another public meeting where we'll present the results of our investigation to the public. And then again, like I've mentioned a couple times, we're going to have that proposed plan where we talk about the options, if necessary, for any additional effort, where the community will be offered the opportunity to participate in that selection process. So all of our final project documents, our work plan, our meeting minutes, our reports, they will be made available. We will have a repository of them if people are interested in the Hingham Public Library, in the Tufts Library in Weymouth, and then also here at the Town Hall. We're going to have copies of all those documents here at the Town Hall if anybody's interested. Additionally, we have this information hotline right here, so if at any time you guys have questions or concerns, feel free, please call this number or email this email address, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Please don't call the Selectman's office. They won't be able to answer any of your questions. They'll have to contact us. So if you have questions or concerns, please feel free. Don't hesitate to contact either one of these, us by either one of these two communication methods. And lastly, a little safety reminder. We call them the 3 R's. So in the event, if you guys are out at the park or if you're at somewhere else ever and you come across something that looks suspicious, now you're aware that there are potentially some munitions-related items that may be present at the park. If you come across something that looks like a munitions item that you think looks strange, please, the first R is recognize. If you recognize something that looks like a potential item, know that that might be what it is and you should leave it alone, walk the other way. Retreat, leave it where it is. Please never, under any circumstance, pick it up, kick it, take it home with you. Don't touch it. If you didn't bring it in, don't take it out. And then call 911 and report what you found. The local police are aware of the project, aware of the situation at the park, and they know what to do. So just a very serious reminder that there are explosive hazards, potential explosive hazards related to any of these items that may still be there. It is serious. So that's all I had today. Like I said, we have some fact sheets up here. We have this little short questionnaire about ways that we can keep you guys informed, and we're curious about what you may or may not know about the former depot or anything related to any potential munitions contamination that may be out there. We're interested to know that. Like I said, we have a sign-in sheet if you'd be kind enough to sign in if you don't mind. And I have some cards of mine up here. I'm available for questions if you want to talk with me one-on-one later. We have other members, folks from the Corps of Engineers and Massachusetts DEP here as well. Or if anybody has any questions now they want to bring up to the group, we can do that.
So you have to use the microphone for a question.
Great. Yeah. If you can just state your name, please.
My name is Pat Kerr. Is Hingham Woods considered in the depot? Was the land where Hingham Woods sits, was that part of the depot?
I can answer that, yes, it was.
It was part of the 991 acres.
Okay, I have a question. If you go down Tucker's Lane, where it dead ends to Beals Cove, there's a huge hill there. And I used to run my dog on that hill. And there's a hole about halfway up that hill. And you can look down in it and you see brick and debris and stuff like that. Now, has anybody ever checked that area to make sure there's no bunkers or debris there?
I think it's most helpful to direct the questions, right?
Yeah, so I would say direct your questions to Lane, but Lane, it seems like what you're gonna need to do is explain how you came to the conclusion that these 5 sites were.
I know that, I understand that part. What I'm saying though, has anybody ever checked this area? Because there's people living on it. I mean, you know, if there's a bunker under there with munitions in it, we should find out.
I'm not sure exactly where that is in here, but as part of that 1996 archive search report and the site inspection, you know, all of the areas within the FUD's boundary were research and
Right, but then at the end of World
Show
War,
the boundary of the flood area, it's that green line,
yeah, the
right?
boundary of the FUDs is this green line right here. So where are we talking about?
I don't know, where would 3A
Do you want-
be to this?
3A this is the 3A bridge right here.
Beale Street, the top green boundary is Beale Street.
This right here?
Beale Street there, then,
So you're-
okay. So it would be right in here then?
No, further left.
Further up,
Right here?
right in there, yeah.
Right here?
Right in there.
All right, all right. So that area was looked at as part of the archive search report. Specifically to that hill that you're speaking about, I can't speak to that specifically.
At the end of World War I, if my history's correct, they just buried a lot of stuff, like gas canisters and stuff like that. Now, if that's in the depot, if that hill's in the depot, I think we should get a metal detector or get, either that or get a camera and go down in that hole and look around. Because like I said, you look down that hole and you see bricks and mortar and junk and it just keeps going down. So, who knows if they didn't just bury it all?
I-
And I mean, there's houses within 100 feet.
All right.
So who would you contact to do that?
I would suggest that you would contact your management in your facility, because if you have a hole somewhere that you think is a hazard, that would be your first address, and then it could be a function of theirs, and then if that's a problem, then they would call public safety and we'd have to come down and take a look at it. But it's obviously been there for a while, it could have been there, it could be there for multiple reasons. I don't believe, with my knowledge of that area, that where the apartments, that there were really many buildings, bunkers or anything like that over in that area.
Didn't they fill in almost all the bunkers?
Most of them
5
were
or 6 years ago.
removed. There was, in the area that you're talking about, there may have been, some of the hills that you see actually weren't bunkers, they were revetments, where the trains would actually back into in the event that they were ever attacked. It would make it harder to bomb a train. So you'll see a lot of areas that have hills with the tracks just went in and stopped, so. definitely historically look at some of the older maps and show there.
So just so everyone knows, this is being televised, it's going out to folks at home. We want to make sure that any communication that's happening through, whether it's questions or replies, if the Army Corps needs to voice an opinion, we need to do it through a microphone, preferably here. So it might be easier, Lane, if you stand here to answer, and then they can come up and turn it back and forth, whatever you need to do.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah. Yep. So again, just to reiterate, I mean, that area was part of a previous investigation, and based on what they found, it wasn't carried forward, but I would, if you have concerns, I would follow up with it. But I would definitely want to reiterate that you should not go look yourself, or if you see anything weird, leave it there, don't pick it up, call 911.
I'm from the Journal, but if anyone else wants to speak, I'll go last. Anyone else want to speak? Okay, sorry. Just wondering, not to be critical, but what took so long to do this since it was so many years ago? Like, to start this, has this been a concern, or just all of a sudden occur that it was a concern? Because it's been a long time.
You mean since the property was transferred?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yes.
Oh,
sorry.
should I hold it? Sorry.
No, I'll
Do you want to hold it? Okay.
So when the property was originally transferred, since then, the Army has recognized that they have an issue. So then they developed the FUDs, and Congress developed the MMRP program to investigate these areas where things kept getting fined when they realized they had an issue for some of these transferred properties. So the Army did an inventory of all of their FUD sites.
Starting like in what year, would you say?
1980s, I think, 1986, I believe.
Okay.
So they did an inventory of all the FUD sites, and they prioritized them based on the potential risk that they thought was there. And they're working through the hundreds or thousands of FUD sites currently. So Hingham was relatively on that scale of risk. This depot was relatively low on that risk scale. Not to say there's not a concern. It's just why.
I have another question.
Yes.
I talked with you about this earlier, but just for the record, I'm just wondering, because in one of the initial notices in the paper, the Journal, last November, they were talking about that there were possible residential areas, and you said you didn't think so, but Conservatory Park, I think, is on part of the former Conservatory Park, and also like Hingham Woods, and also Beals Cove, and also, the Back River condos is right near the Weymouth Back River, so I'm just wondering if those areas are going to be looked at, because it seems like they're in kind of a close proximity.
As part of this investigation, we are only looking at these 6 sites. The other areas within the depot have been, investigated by the Army previously, and these are the 6 sites that have moved forward to this phase of the process. I think you asked me before about what effects to the residential communities this investigation might have. I did speak a little bit about those safety buffer zones that we're going to have to establish. So those safety buffer zones are based on where we're digging. So we believe that we'll be able to limit any impact of those buffer zones to the park, and so that residential areas will not be affected by any of that.
But I guess I'm just concerned about if you investigated the areas, so did you investigate the areas, the residential areas that were part of the depot initially? Because I think Hingham Woods part of that? You said it was. Yep, Hingham Woods and Conservatory Park. So again, I'm just wondering if anyone has thought about looking into those, because I think some of them were part of the depot site. Because what if there's hazards under their houses?
Yes, ma'am. Those areas were looked at as part of the 1996 archive search report, and then again as part of the 2008 site inspection. The the entire depot was looked at beginning in that 1996 archive search report.
Including all those residential areas?
Everything inside of the boundaries of the depot,
But that included those areas?
if they're inside the boundaries of the depot. Yes, ma'am. See how far we can stretch it.
Thank you, and thank you for a very informative presentation. My name's Linda D'Angelo. I'm a North Weymouth resident. I'm also the president of the Back River Watershed Association, so we really welcome this cleanup and trying to learn all we can about it. One of the things that comes to mind, we talk about, this investigation environmentally. So that's one of the things that we're concerned with, obviously, the detection of these munitions and hazardous waste are all extremely important. Also wondering about anything that you might see in terms of infrastructure that would emit sewerage leaks and things like that. Would that come up in your investigation?
Potentially. I mean, only if we happen to be digging something that happened just randomly to be there.
Okay.
So we're not looking for that. But if we happen to be doing an intrusive or digging somewhere and we see something, then we will document that and we will report that, up to our team.
And who would actually if there was a cleanup necessary, would this be done by the Army Corps of Engineers?
Sorry.
Yeah. Would the Army Corps of Engineers actually do a cleanup if it was necessary? If you found contamination, would it be their responsibility?
Yes, after the investigation, if it's determined that there is a need for further cleanup, then it is the Army Corps of Engineers would be responsible for that cleanup.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Healy, can you give us a sense as to what the buffer zone consists of in terms of how far it extends from the area that you're working in? Is it going to compromise the traffic flow on 3A at all? Things of that nature?
Yes, that's a good question. So the safety zone that we're establishing is based off of the largest known, quote, live munitions item that has been found at from the depot. So they found a 5-inch projectile in 1975. So our safety zone is based on that 5-inch projectile, and so that's 377 feet. So 377 feet around that where we're digging, that is the radius of our safety buffer zone. There will be, if you look at the North Pier, that Route 3A is within 377 feet of the North Pier. So while we are working in the North Pier, we talked about it today, there's a good chance that we'll have to shut down part of Route 3A at some specific times while we're doing our investigation. We won't know how long until we get our data back from our data collection, so it's hard to say at this time. I'd be hesitant to throw out a specific, length of time. We can be flexible on when we do our work there. We can schedule our work in areas that have the potential to affect Route 3A and other sensitive areas when there are specific for 3A low traffic times. If there are low traffic times, Sunday mornings, that kind of stuff. If that's an option, we can break it up and do it in 2-hour segments, go work 2 hours, have it closed. We have options on what we can do to try to minimize the impact to the community. And we're going to make every effort that we can to minimize any impacts to the folks, to any closure to Route 3A, to people's use of the park. We want to make sure that we don't disrupt people's lives as little as possible.
Is there a likelihood that your area of inquiry would extend beyond the existing boundaries?
Yes, if during our investigation we find evidence. So part of the goal of this investigation is, like I said, determine nature and extent. So determine how much and where this may exist. So if during our investigation we are at the boundary of one of our sites, one of our MRSs, we may, if we're finding items at that boundary, in order to fully delineate it, in order to fully figure out the full extent of where those things go, then we would potentially do what we call step outs, which is, step out a little further outside of the boundary and see if there's anything there. And if we would continue to find things, we would continue to step out until we stopped finding items, and then we would know the boundary of the actual site. That is one of the goals of the investigation, is to determine the actual boundaries. And the sites, when we're all done, the sites may look different. They may be smaller, they may be larger, they may be subdivided again based on what we find. So there is that potential, depending on what we find.
I take it then that the area will be altered by virtue of the digging. Especially that area that greenish polygon color. Yeah, no, the other one. Yellow, green, close. I mean, obviously, if you find something there, you're gonna remove it. Is that the plan, or is it the plan?
Yes. No. If we find something, we will remove it. So if we find, anything that we pull out of the ground, we're taking with us. So nothing will be left there. No, yes. No, we will leave the site in its current. Yep. Yep. And again, we're not remediating the site at this time. So we're doing a sample, or an investigation within the sites to determine what might be there. We're not totally cleaning up all the sites, but if we find something, we will be disposing of it and getting rid of it.
Ron Clough from Hingham. Maybe you can't answer this, but Wampatuck State Park was an annex to this facility. Has that area been done the same way you're doing this project?
I don't know the answer to that question. Ann, would you like to? Yeah, sorry. I'm going to let Ann answer that question. Ann from DEP.
Yeah, I can answer that question. I'm Ann Malowitz, Mass DEP, and Wampatuck State Park is in actually two remediation pieces. One was the Wampatuck State Park part of Fort Devens Annex, and that was remediated under the BRAC program with Fort Devens Management and also a project manager from Mass DEP. The other side of the active Wampatuck State Park, there are various areas in that park that are currently under investigation. There's one actually in a phase where it's a remedial investigation and feasibility study, and that's the former burn pit. So that's being worked on now, and my group is actually taking care of it. That's why Lane didn't know about that. So,
Thank you. No other questions? All right. Thank you, everybody.